You are watching South Asian Trend.
ਵਿਆਹ ਸ਼ਾਦੀ ਦੀ ਯਾਦਗਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਫਿਲਮਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਟਰਸਟਵਰਦੀ ਨਾਮ ਪਲੈਟੀਨਮ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਕਸ਼ਨਸ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਈ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਫਿਲਮਾਂ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਲੰਮਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਹੈ। ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਐਡਿਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਫਿਲਮ 4 ਤੋਂ 6 ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੇਣ ਦਾ ਵਾਅਦਾ ਵੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਰੇਟ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਕੰਪੀਟੀਟਿਵ ਹਨ। ਆਪਣੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਫੰਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਦੀ ਬੁਕਿੰਗ ਲਈ 416 410 8544 'ਤੇ ਫੋਨ ਕਰੋ। ਪਲੈਟੀਨਮ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਕਸ਼ਨਸ 416 410 8544।
Welcome to yet another episode of Community Buzz, where we week after week bring out real Canadian issues, especially to be understood by new Canadians, and we urge all new Canadians to keep themselves abreast with all local happenings, all levels of government, what their roles and responsibilities are, and what issues to bring to what level of government. In this very connection, we today have two members of parliament, one from the federal parliament, one from the provincial parliament, from the NDP caucus in our studios, one being a foreign policy critic, NDP being the opposition, official opposition, Paul Dewar, and one MPP Jagmeet Singh, which we all are very well known to. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and it's great to be back in Brampton, but also very important for me to be able to talk to you and to your viewers today, because what you just said is so important to us as parliamentarians, that we have a dialogue with citizens, and in fact, in particular with new Canadians, about what levels of government do what and the issues of the day. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely, you're welcome, and welcome to Brampton as well. So to you, Jagmeet.
Thank you, Akbarji. It's always a pleasure to be on your show, and always a pleasure to spend time with you.
Thank you once again. Your detailed introduction, what riding do you come from,
Yeah.
and what is your exact role, since NDP is first time the official opposition?
Well, my riding is Ottawa Centre, which is interesting probably for your viewers because it includes Parliament. And so it's right in the heart of the city. It is my role as the official opposition foreign affairs critic to, hold the government to account, to critique the government, to make suggestions about how we can do things better. And I'm also the vice chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, which, as the name would suggest, deals with all foreign affairs issues. And I've been elected since 2006, and since 2007 I've been the foreign affairs spokesperson for our party.
So since you have the role of official opposition, and we at every point, whenever we bring up NDP, we remember late Jack Layton, great man who brought the party to this level. What do you see the future of NDP as official opposition and overall? And we'll come around to other discussions about the government, but first let's take the role of NDP.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Jack. He was a good friend of both Jagmeet and I. Was a mentor to me. And one of the things that Jack said to me when I was appointed as a foreign affairs critic, spokesperson, and he said this to all of us as caucus members, but very important for foreign affairs: I want you to hold the government to account and to oppose what they're doing if we disagree. But I also, and very important for us, is to propose, come up with alternatives. And so for us right now, as the official opposition in our system, we're the government in waiting. And so what it means for me is that a lot of my time is spent working with communities, talking to people, obviously talking to ambassadors about the issues of the day, and coming up with our vision as the NDP, as official opposition, for what we would do in government. What I see for the future for our party, frankly, is to form the first NDP government. We've had the other two parties in, and I'll leave people to critique them on their own basis. But I think for us as a party, we've actually, because of the work of Jack and everyone working together, we have seen our numbers increase because I think we've stayed positive and we've shown people that there's an alternative to the existing parties, as Preston Manning used to call them, the old line parties, but the parties who have been in before. So right now, I'm very focused on, and we'll be working with people today and hearing from people, listening to people and expressing our points of view and our positive vision, what we would see for Canada, and in my case, for our foreign policy.
Very good. I'm on the same page with you on that. But having said that, is there a policy shift within your own party after the new leader came in, Mr. Montclair? Or how do you cope with that? Or how did everybody adjust to that? It's a big gap to fulfill after Mr. Layton.
Absolutely. You know what? Everyone acknowledged after Jack passed away so suddenly, and it really was hard on everyone, but we, I think, rose to the challenge, is that on the one hand, no one could be Jack. You know,
absolutely,
you
no
can't.
doubts.
You have to be your own person.
Yes.
But the values and the expression of a positive vision was something we all wanted to adhere to, and Tom has done that as a leader, Mr. Mulcair, and because he understands what we all believed in, and he's part of the team, and I've been very impressed with him.
He's
you know,
our leader of the team now.
Exactly, he's my boss, and what Tom's done is he's listened very carefully, and I think of things that we've advanced for the Punjab Heritage Month, and coming up with ideas around making sure that the things that Jack had worked so hard on, we were going to continue. And that's what Tom's done. He's been open and meeting with communities right across the country. And frankly, that's his job. He's got to go out there and do what Jack did. Go connect with people. And so just to answer your question very succinctly, you see a continuation of the values, the vision that our party had with Jack, with Tom, obviously as a different person. He brings different experiences. He's been experienced in government. He's a very knowledgeable, very smart guy. And he is someone who's going to show that we have an experienced team. So, he's carried on Jack's vision and ideas, as we all have, but he's been himself as well, as we all have to be.
Absolutely. I have interacted with Jagmeet Singh, and you very well can refer to that we both seem to have one common passion, and that is for human rights, and rightly so. On human rights issue, you being the foreign policy critic at the federal level, how do you see our government working, Canadian government working?
Well, and now I'm going to be critical of the Conservative
Absolutely,
government because
job.
that's my job. And I'm really saddened because I travel a lot. And what I've seen in the last number of years is that our reputation as a country has been lessened. And that's mainly because the Conservative
The reputation as the country internationally, globally?
Absolutely, globally. This isn't just about Canadians who are concerned, and many rightly are concerned about what direction Canada is going on the international stage. But now we're getting it from a lot of our allies. When we pull out of international treaties, when we look the other way on human rights, when, for instance, when there was a simple proposition at the United Nations for the Palestinians to have observer status in the UN, and our government not only voted against that proposition, but they were very strongly against it. This is contrary to the values of Canadians. We believe in the UN very strongly. There are problems with the UN, let's be clear, but there's so many things that
the Iraq War.
Exactly, and what we need to see is that we have a government that is going to be positive about multilateralism, working with other countries. That's not what we see with the Conservatives. And so what we've said is that on human rights, as an example, we need to strengthen our reputation with human rights. We need to invest more in human rights. We used to have, as a very concrete example, an institute called the Institute for Rights and Democracy. What was its role? To promote democracy and human rights around the world. Do you know what happened with that institute? It was closed down by the Conservatives. That's one example.
Reason being?
Internal politics, they said, but it was mainly because of their political appointments. The person who was the chair of Rights and Democracy was essentially not believing in the whole institute. And It was a horrible demise, and if everyone, it's on the web, the history of rights and democracy. But at the end of the day, they said, well, we're not sure this is the kind of money we need to be spending in this area. Well, if Canada can't promote human rights and democracy around the world, then, what should we be doing? We believe we should be investing in human rights protection. We should be investing in promoting democracy in a respectful way. That's what Canada's values are all about. So the Conservatives have decided to withdraw from the world stage, to not invest in institutes that promote democracy and human rights. And when it comes to the United Nations, it sees the United Nations more as an irritant, as a bother, than it is about an institution that is absolutely critical to the functioning of global affairs. And we would want to see Canada be more involved in human rights protection, to be more engaged in human rights around the world, and to ensure that when people see the Canadian flag, there's no question where we stand. Promoting human rights, promoting democracy and respect for pluralism, and looking at Canada as being a contributor to world peace and to helping in problem areas. The frank assessment of most people now, when I travel the world, is Canada's just not there. We lost our seat for the Security Council, which is the main decision body of the United Nations.
Absolutely.
That's a tremendous setback for Canada, and that was because of this Conservative government not being able to work with other countries around the world.
Coming back to human rights and Canadian role on human rights globally, I understand we did address the Palestinian issue. Of course, it's a shame that it hasn't been resolved. Nobody says that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, but at the same time, so do Palestinians.
Exactly.
So there has to be a common ground, which we have failed to address globally.
Mm-hmm.
Canada in particular, years ago, I remember Canada on a world level just being viewed as a very neutral
That's
country.
correct.
But now people talk and they say Canada takes sides, which is
Absolutely.
unfortunately we shouldn't be taking sides.
That's correct.
Having said that, I'll magnify a little bit on the issues of human rights coming to India and Pakistan.
Yes.
And both have not a very welcome record on that.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, what is happening in Pakistan is very unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to see our government's stance on that
Mm-hmm.
and statements on that. But at the same time, there is a common problem between India and Pakistan that goes way back to its independence, that is 1947,
That's right.
and that is the Kashmir issue.
That's right.
We have had UN resolutions on that.
Mm-hmm.
We have had numerous papers on that. My director tells me that we do have to go for a break. We'll come back from the break and
Okay.
we'll address this issue in particular. And Jagmeet, when we come back, I want your take on that too, because you and me belong to that part of the world. That is originally where we come from. So I do need your views on that.
Sure. Terrific.
We'll be back after a short break. Stay tuned to Community Buzz. We are interviewing two politicians from NDP caucus, one at the provincial level and one at the federal level.
ਅਸਾਂ ਥਾਈਲੈਂਡ ਦੀ ਭੂਤ ਜਾਣਾ ਏ ਉਥੋਂ ਗ੍ਰੈਨਾਈਟ ਤੇ ਮਾਰਬਲ ਲਿਆਉਣਾ ਏ ਟਾਈਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਲਿਆਵਾਂਗੇ ਹੋ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਸਜਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਦੀ ਦਿੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਰੋ ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲਈ ਅਮਰਜੀਤ ਮਾਨ ਜਾਂ ਜੋਤ ਘੁੰਮਣ ਨੂੰ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 9057922090
टाइलैंड डिपो।
जब लड़की अपनी स्किन की वजह से परेशान हो
तो फिक्र की क्या बात है, लेजर स्पॉट है ना।
लेजर स्पॉट, फोटो फेशियल, थर्मोज एंटी एजिंग, लेजर हेयर रिमूवल, लेजर स्पॉट, where beauty meets elegant professionals.
लेजर स्पॉट हाईवे 10 और क्वींस के संगम पर। कॉल शेला 9054872680।
Welcome back to Community Buzz, as we are in conversation with Paul Dewar, who's a federal member parliament from NDP caucus in Ottawa, and a provincial member parliament from Ontario, Jagmeet Singh. Welcome back to the show. We were already in conversation over the Kashmir issue, and that has been an ongoing issue. What is your take on that?
Well, let me say, and you've already stated this is something that is a hangover from 47. And when you look at it, it's really a question of, are we going to follow the UN resolutions that have been passed to come up with
And they're very clear on that.
Absolutely. And you know, this is where we need to strengthen the institution of the United Nations so that we can see these resolutions not just being passed, but being action-oriented. What I mean by that is that I would like to see, and certainly our party would like to see, similar to what's happening right now with regards to the Middle East, that we see countries who are trusted, like Canada used to be, but we can still play a role, work as mediators between India and Pakistan. And what that means is that we say to both countries, clearly this cannot continue. Clearly there needs to be some resolution here. And let's be honest that, you know, over the period of time since the 47, there has been skirmishes and there have been, let's face it, some responsibility for both countries in terms of how to treat this. But at the end of the day, we're talking about something that is in the hands of India, and there could be an opportunity here bilaterally to start with, working with India to say, look, this is an important foreign policy question for Canada. We need to see some resolution. We want to be part of that. That's the first step. That's not saying what we believe one side or the other on Kashmir. That's saying it's important to us.
Because people of Kashmir are suffering. It's
Exactly.
not India or Pakistan
That's right.
suffering.
And
They have been played politics with.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, and hand it over to my colleague here. Finally, it's just that if Canada wants to, it can play a positive role to get a resolution here.
Absolutely.
And that means by stating the issue clearly with India, obviously. I know in the case of Pakistan, if they saw that we were able to bring a process forward, I think we could see that happen. But we could work with other like-minded countries in the region and other countries like Norway and others.
China is there. Afghanistan is there.
Absolutely.
Afghanistan is coming out of its own turmoil, and I applaud them for that.
Yes, and I think it should be looked at in that light. And you're quite insightful here, because most people don't understand that. It's not just an isolated issue. This has the whole region involved.
Absolutely.
And that's why if you look at a six-party talks or something like that model, where you bring in other countries in the neighborhood and have other countries like Canada be involved, we could see a resolution, but only if willing people are coming to the table.
I want your take on that as well.
Definitely. I think one of the key issues that we forget when we're looking at the struggles between two countries and their position on a particular area
The
of
main
land.
strugglers are the Kashmiris here.
That's
in this
right.
case.
We forget the people of the region. So I think one of the focuses needs to be on really listening to what the people need and focusing on the reality that whatever political decision we help to solve the problem, end of the day, we need to have the input of the local people who reside in those communities to figure out what they can do and what steps they can be assisted on. So it's not like an outside-in model. It's actually a grassroots model that the community is making decisions and we're facilitating those decisions.
I understand that you have a law background too. Having said that, I would like you to comment on this thing that very well said about most people do, that no matter what, we have to do business with India. Economy is on a boom. Hallelujah. I'm on the same page. Nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, shouldn't it be an international recognized country like Canada's role be okay? We understand. We are doing business with, but at the same time, we have issues that we need to discuss. Where is that?
I think that's a tremendous point. I think all too often what we see is that people become very fearful when there's talks of economics or financial discussions on the table. Then they say, let's brush human rights aside in the interests of economic development. I think that they're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to dismiss human rights issues to be able to have a working relationship with someone. In fact, I think you can have a better working relationship. I think you can garner more international support. You can gain a greater reputation if you do keep your principles and say, listen, as a country that respects human rights and democracy, we expect our partners to also respect these values because these are international values. And for us to do business with you, we also want you to consider dealing with these issues and not take the approach of being afraid of raising this issue because it might jeopardize any business deals. I think that lacks principle. And I think what we need to do is have a principled approach that, yes, we can have business, we can conduct our affairs, but we're not afraid to address issues which also impact many people.
Absolutely, and I'm saying, keeping business aside, even Pakistan record on human rights isn't not all that praiseworthy either. So these needs to be addressed, and I haven't seen over the years any politician doing that in particular, or any political party taking a stand on that. In your political party at the federal level,
Yes.
do you have a stand on it?
I'm really glad you brought this up. I've been working with many of my colleagues, civil society and others, to do what Jagmeet has said. Let's look at responsible trade. And responsible trade for us means that you don't put aside human rights. I'll give you a concrete example. We signed a free trade agreement, the Canadian government did, with the support of the Conservatives and Liberals, with Colombia. We were against that because of the extrajudicial killings that were going on, that, union leaders and, people who are
People
teachers.
married in Colombia.
Yeah, and why would we sign a trade deal with a country like that without assurances that they were going to change their record on human rights? So we oppose that. We believe that, as Jagmeet quite rightly said, you have to be mature about these things and be upfront. And so our party has a different take on it. But we also believe we should be engaging with countries to help them, support them if they're willing, to enhance and to strengthen their human rights.
If they are not willing, they could be pressurized in a diplomatic
Absolutely.
way, of course.
Another example is Afghanistan. Our position on Afghanistan was very strong, and Mr. Layton was very strong about it. It was about, we didn't think it was the right mission for us. But what we did, and I personally was involved with, was to make sure the Canadian government continues to invest with the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission. And we continue to do that. We continue to push for it. That's what we need to do. It's about being responsible with trade. It's about being clear about our principles. It's about corporate social responsibility. And it's also making sure that we invest to help with capacity building in things like human rights. Finally, people remember what happened in Bangladesh with that horrific factory collapse. And we were all taken by what happened. But we as a party pushed for, and I got hearings at the Foreign Affairs Committee, as to what was Canada's role in that factory collapsing. We know that we had a Canadian company involved, Loblaws, Joe Fresh. And we brought members of the Foreign Affairs Committee together to study that issue. And we've now pushing for our government to be more responsible with corporate social responsibility, that Canadian companies, when they're doing their business abroad, need to be as responsible overseas as they are here in Canada. And that's a very unique position of the NDP versus the other parties, and that's something I'm very proud of.
The budget passed,
Sure.
and we're talking interior budget here,
Mm-hmm.
and it passed because of you guys. What are the plans?
Okay. So the budget negotiation was very difficult. It was something that we had to really weigh what we could do to better the interests of people in Ontario. And many people were talking to us about, well, you were in a good position, you could gain seats, you could gain this, you could gain that. And we decided to make a principled stance and say, we're not looking at, as the NDP, we're not looking at what we could do to better our position as a party, but we're really looking at this as an opportunity to better the lives of people in Ontario. And that's where we made a shift, where instead of looking to gain politically, we look to gain for the people. And that's why we put forward 3 main recommendations or 3 main requests in the budget, and then a 4th one once the budget was passed.
Having said that, before we wind up this interview for the time being, because we are running out of time, NDP got a breakthrough in Brampton or the general GTA area because of you. What are the future plans for federal candidates as well as provincial candidates?
Our plan is to have, we're looking very aggressively to have a strong team across all the ridings. I'm working very diligently on putting together teams across the other Brampton ridings and working on finding candidates of high quality. It's not actually hard to do that now that people see the tides are shifting and that the NDP is on the rise. Federally, we're the official opposition, and Paul Dewar's work on foreign affairs is really getting people aware of our strong position in human rights and in proposing an alternative to what the government's doing currently, and which is a really strong message, and people are resonating with that. Provincially, with the passing of the auto insurance as a piece that was directly in benefit of people, it was the first time in about 20 years that laws were passed along with the budget where the concerns of people were placed instead of the concerns of the insurance companies. Up till now, every amendment that has been passed were amendments that would save the insurance companies money, would cut down their costs, but it didn't actually result in reducing our premiums. This is the first time we placed laws in place that would actually bring down premiums by 15% on average across the province, and we're hopefully going to see that in a year and a half's time. So that was a step forward. I think that's getting people turned on to the idea that this is a party that cares about people, that's putting their needs first, and I think both federally and provincially we're going to have a great team of candidates in the upcoming elections.
Thank you. Before we end this show, would you have any message out there for audience across the GTA especially?
I would, and that is look at the NDP as an alternative. We see the GTA as our party, and Mr. Mulcair sees it as, frankly, the most important strategic area for us as a party to grow. We've had success provincially. We're so proud of Jagmeet in the last federal election where he almost was elected as an MP, but we want to build on that. So, what we say is look to the NDP for your interests, to make life more affordable for your family, to have a progressive foreign policy for our country, and to look for the change that you want. And most people, when they look at our values, they look at the kind of people who represent our party, I think identify strongly with us. And our job is to connect with more of them. And my message to all of the members of the GTA is look to the NDP because we have a different vision, one I think that you can connect with, and look forward to people connecting with us and joining our team.
Thank you very much. A message from you, from the provincial level?
Yes, certainly. I think that what we're able to see is that in this past budget, we were able to pass the 15% reduction to auto insurance, jobs for youth, and increasing funding for home care. Three things that clearly show our party's commitment to making life more affordable and helping out everyday people in Ontario. And the fourth thing, which I'm very proud of, and I think this is a symbol of or an example of how politics should be done, this is looking forward beyond even my political term by implementing a financial accountability office similar to what we have in the federal government, which is the Parliamentary Budget Office. This is an institution that's going to exist beyond my term in politics, beyond my lifetime, hopefully, in politics. This is an institution that's for the people. It's not going to be partisan. And we've seen the great work that this similar institution has done in the federal government by helping out, by exposing some of the miscalculations of the government, by giving the true cost of various projects so that the people of Canada can actually have an objective viewpoint. Similarly, in Ontario, this would have prevented many of the scandals that we've seen by having an institution that looks at the costs and provides the people of Ontario with a true cost and a true estimate. That gives us more accountability and more transparency, which is a step forward for democracy, and I'm very proud that we're able to bring that forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being in the studio today. And before we wrap up, I would like you to tell us any more questions or feedbacks you have from this interview. Today we had 2 member parliaments, one from a provincial level, one from the federal level, both from NDP caucus, an open discussion. They are available for any comments, and your comments do help a lot in building a better society. Thank you very much. Do have a nice day ahead.
ਵਿਆਹ ਸ਼ਾਦੀ ਦੀ ਯਾਦਗਾਰ ਨੂੰ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਫਿਲਮਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਟਰਸਟਵਰਦੀ ਨਾਮ ਪਲੈਟੀਨਮ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਕਸ਼ਨਸ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਹਾਈ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਫਿਲਮਾਂ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਲੰਮਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਹੈ, ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਐਡਿਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਫਿਲਮ 4 ਤੋਂ 6 ਹਫ਼ਤੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੇਣ ਦਾ ਵਾਅਦਾ ਵੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ ਅਤੇ ਰੇਟ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਕੰਪੀਟੀਟਿਵ ਹਨ। ਆਪਣੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਫੰਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਦੀ ਬੁਕਿੰਗ ਲਈ 416 410 8544 ਤੇ ਫੋਨ ਕਰੋ। ਪਲੈਟੀਨਮ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਕਸ਼ਨਸ 416 410 8544